Welcome to the Creating High Performance Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Olympian Jonathan Edwards. Let's get started. All right, everybody, listen, it's Jonathan Edwards. Welcome to the our first podcast, our first Facebook Live of 2020. I hope you had an amazing break. I know for a lot of our athletes, they are back at it. So the luge crowd, I know guys are going over to Lausanne for the Youth Olympics, which is coming up in 2020 as well, which is pretty sweet. Super excited about that. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. But Heather Peterson, good to see you. How's it going? Love Facebook for this. This is awesome. So today, I wanted to talk about a kind of an interesting topic, which a lot of people don't really know. They may know in some ways, they may have heard it, but when it comes to athletes, they may not know exactly how it applies. All right, so I'm going to do my best to describe it today. And if you're listening to me on iTunes, I would love it if you would send me a note at some point and just say, hey, so it's Coach Edwards at athletespecific.com. And I would love to just know who you are and what you're doing and what you're up to. And if you're an athlete, if you got athletes, let me know who they are, what they're doing. That's kind of the juice that keeps us all going. So I've got a lot of big plans for 2020. Going to be doing a lot of content. I hope that you'll share it with athletes and parents and coaches who need to hear it. Working on a new book and actually a couple book projects. And so a lot of big plans. And also growing my Athlete Breakthrough Blueprint, which is the world's first and only, as far as I know, mental performance school for athletes. And so really excited about that, really excited about it for this year. So what I wanted to talk about today was the idea of Parkinson's Law. So what Parkinson's Law is, it basically says like work expands so it fills the time available for its completion. So it basically, the work you have to do is going to take as long as the time you give yourself to do it. So as a writer, one thing, I wrote a book and the book took way too long. And why? Because I gave it that much time to, I gave it the time to finish. I tried to give myself some dates to get it done, but I wasn't pushing them. And so the truth is that we mostly do that with all the projects we have. So, if we give something a year to finish, it'll take you a year. If you give yourself a month to finish it, it'll take you a month. And to use book writing as an example, I know authors who've given themselves like a weekend and some even a day to write a book, and they'll get it done. They'll just totally cram and get it done. So, which always amazes me. I don't have that skill set yet. Like, I know that if I was to write like straight for an hour, I would get 2,400 words, which means that like in 20 hours, I should have a book worth of content done. But then you have editing and all this other stuff, and it's kind of pretty crazy. So all that stuff takes time. But the truth is that Parkinson's Law, whether you're doing the dishes or cleaning the house, it's going to take as long as the time you give it, right? So for a lot of the parents that I work with, so in my Athlete Breakthrough Blueprint program, one of the things I do with my athletes is I get to know the parents a little bit, and I find out some of the parents' habits, a lot of the parents' habits, carry over to the habits of the athlete, right? And some parents are shocked that things that they do would possibly affect their athlete because they feel like it's a different world. Like being an athlete is somehow different than being like what I like to call an athlete in everyday life, right? Like, you may be an executive, you may be just a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, or you might have a company, who knows what. But when you understand Parkinson's Law and you can apply it strategically, you can really cut down a ridiculous amount of time. So like, I'll give you an example. Like last night, my wife and I, we headed out, we picked up the kids from school, and then we went to the mall, and then we did she was like, oh, I just need to stop in the grocery store before we go home and pick up a few things. Well, my mistake was I didn't say like, yo, we got like 15 minutes, I got to get home. Like an hour later, she was just finished shopping, and I'm like all ticked off, and I'm, get another cart. And I'm like, what else you got left? Let's get out of here. Right. So that's a perfect example of Parkinson's Law just expands, like something that normally takes like 20 minutes took like an hour. Right. And so most people don't put timelines on activities at all, right? We're good at really scheduling something. Like we'll schedule the beginning of a meeting, but we won't put an end time on it. Right. when as an athlete, you might have a training session like my hockey guys, they've got an hour's worth of ice time. We're starting practice and everybody's like, everybody's like ready to get on the ice, right? And then kids are barely, they're having a hard time coming off, right? They just want to stay because they like it so much. But in life, we tend to, just things just drag out. We'll have a meeting or a phone call. We don't have an end time to that phone call. And sometimes we feel really weird about doing that because we don't want to tick off our friend, which is kind of weird. But when you can, I always joke like this is why bosses make lunchtime an hour, because they know if lunchtime was like open ended, nobody would come back after lunch, right? That's kind of the deal. So one of the things that comes though as an athlete, and this is something that affected me in my own life when I left athletics, was like, all right, when you're an athlete, you're always trying to be perfect. Right? You're trying to, you want to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, you don't win. Usually like somebody else gets the gold medal and you get something else, right? And so you kind of leave the day and you're just like, whatever, I don't feel great, but I didn't win. So obviously it wasn't good enough. But when we carry that out into the rest of our life, perfectionism just kind of kills all sorts of progress, right? So this is something that causes work to expand, is that we always have something else to do, right? Or we can always find something else to do towards that particular task, right? So, currently like my house is for sale, like we're looking to move, and we had a showing yesterday, and one of the things that we did, right, you got to get your house like cleaned up and ready to go, and it's been after Christmas, my mom was in town, the house is a bit of a mess, we still have the Christmas tree up, like all this stuff, right? And so we knew that we had a showing like 18 hours prior to that showing. It was 3:00 yesterday. You know how long it took us to get the house done? We were doing stuff right up until like 5 minutes before that showing. It drove me crazy. Like I wasted so much time. And the mistake was that, we know now kind of like what it should take, but we just let it kind of drag out and just consume the day. And I totally lost track of the day, which really made me mad, because there's always something to do. Right. And so the same thing goes with like writing a book or anything like that, is that it'll just fill, like the task will just fill, because you're always going to find something to do. Okay. So athletes, one of the things that we don't like, as human beings, is we don't like negative feedback, right? Just generally, we just don't like negative feedback. But some of the most productive people that I know, some of the most successful people I know, crave feedback. And so one of the ways to get out of perfectionism, and I'm going to tie this back into your athlete here, just hang with me one second. All right. So is that as human beings, as adults, we don't often like feedback, right? But if we can get our work out there, we can start getting a result, and then from that result is when you can now make improvements. Without a result, you don't really know, right? You don't know how good or bad you are, right? Or you just avoid putting yourselves in situations where you can get a result. And so when it comes to athletes, one of the things that we do is we know from long-term athlete development that we want our athletes to have basically 3 types of athletic experiences. We want them to win, right? We want to have them at that experience of winning. We want to have the kind of the middle ground where they're having competitions that are evenly matched, and it's a little, give and take, that sort of stuff, right? And then we want to have situations where they lose. And the reason why we want all 3 is we want an athlete to develop a overall emotional skill set to deal with winning, losing, and then just battling, right? But what tends to happen is athletes will avoid situations early. Now, let me preface all this, because there are some situations that you want an athlete to avoid, right? I wrote about this in my book, a story about it, like a young hockey player who was undersized, he was the right age, but he was undersized for his age. And he gets like run over by a freight train in the middle of a hockey game, knocked out cold, like ambulance, the whole thing. Obviously, that's not a situation that was good for him, right? We want to be careful about those extreme situations, right? If you're cliff jumping, you want to check out where you're going to land, right? That just seems fairly obvious, although not obvious all the time. Anyway, but I want my athletes to experience disappointment as early as possible. Now, but I don't want them to have it all the time, right? So I've coached my son's soccer team that didn't win a single game all season. That is not helpful to anybody, right? And it takes an incredible amount of motivation to lose all the time. When I was trying to become a All-American lacrosse goalie, I craved putting myself in really difficult situations where we lost because I knew I was going to get lots of shots and lots of opportunities to be able to get feedback in order to improve. So where some parents will miss the boat is that they'll allow their athlete to avoid maybe taking a step further. They might feel like it's too much. Maybe it's too big of a competition or too big of an experience, for fear that they're going to all of a sudden get demotivated. But what I've noticed is that over time, a lot of the work that I do with my athletes in my blueprint is that I'm patching up past experiences where they were put into situations and they didn't know, they weren't mentally prepared to lose, right? And just benefit from the experience, because the idea was like, well, we can't lose. We don't want to be losing. But losing is actually this huge stepping stone in order to move forward. And so things take more time. Again, Parkinson's Law, things take more time. Instead of moving into that experience and getting feedback right away, the athlete avoids the experience altogether, and now progress takes longer than it needs to be. All right. One thing I know about human beings, right, and we would all agree to this, is that humans are incredibly adaptable, right? You just look at how humans as a whole have moved across the globe. We have people in ridiculously hot climates, and we have people in ridiculously cold climates, and we have people right in the middle. So it's just one example of showing how people can adapt. Athletes are, especially if they adopt the right attitude, they are especially able to adapt because you put them into certain situations and they have to adapt. So for those of you guys know, one of my favorite teams is the Patriots, the New England Patriots. Whether you hate them, love them or not, doesn't matter. But one of the things they're really good at is just taking this attitude of that whatever the situation is going to be, we're going to be ready, right? That's why they practice in the rain 2 days before the game, because it might rain on game day, right? Or they might practice, special plays that they may see against their opponent. Over this Christmas holiday, for those of you who know, I live in Canada, and up here junior hockey's huge, and the Junior World Championships was going on, and Canada won, which was cool. But they played the Czech Republic, and what was interesting about the Czech Republic was they got decimated by injuries. It was ridiculous. I think 2 of their 3 goalies got hurt. Their top players got hurt. So what happens then? Well, you still have to play the game, right? You still have to play the game. It's still 60 minutes. They had penalties. They had penalty kills. They had penalty. Guys just had to adapt. They were thrown into different situations than they might normally have been in. But they just had to find a way to make it happen because the environment changed and circumstances changed. And they just had you're still playing to win, so you're just finding a way to do that, right? I tell the story about skiers a lot. Skiers go to a venue, right? They get the World Cup circuit at the beginning of the year, and they know where they're going. And they may end up at a hill, and they've thought all summer about that hill, and they know that, there's this drop and this curve and this corner and this hill and all that stuff. And they may get there, and all of a sudden the weather shifts, and they move the start down 100 yards. Completely changes the pace and all that stuff. Well, they have to adapt. And so I know that our athletes can adapt to do that. The key to all that adaptation is that an athlete develops what are called emotional regulation techniques, right? So your athlete goes and all of a sudden something changes. Well, if your athlete gets derailed by that situation, then it's going to take them longer to develop those skills they have to have anyway. In luge specifically, there's this thing that happens in luge when a young athlete starts the sport, and they go to a track and they're learning, and we start them down low and then you move up, right? People always, look at luge and they go oh my God, you guys are crazy. We don't go right off the top, right? Kind of like when you learn how to ride a bike, you didn't go right off the top either, right? You pedaled slow, and then maybe you did a hill here or there, right? But it took time. You did progression. Anything's possible with progression. But one of the things that happens is that if an athlete progresses up the track, like pretty quickly, like, they don't have any crashes, they don't have any problems, the coaches are kind of like, we're just hoping that they're going to be okay. Because if they get all the way up to the top of the track and then they have a crash and it's at top speed, that's scarier than if they have a crash at a lower speed, right? And they start to kind of get those kinks out. So we want that feedback all along the way. And the more feedback we have, the better off we're going to be, right? So the athlete's going to have those emotional regulation techniques to survive as the pie gets bigger, as the platform gets bigger, that sort of thing. So what most athletes do and what most families do is when they come into a sport, we're immediately kind of inundated with this progression. Like, oh, you're 10 years old, you should be this, or you're 12 and you should be doing this, and 14, and so on and so on and so on. And you're immediately kind of thrown into these little boxes, right? That, your kid should be this tall in this, and be this heavy, and they should be able to run this fast or do these sorts of things. And if they don't, how do you feel? You feel like you should just quit, right? And what's worse is that people will start to compare themselves to, and this is what always kind of floors me with my athletes, is that they're always going to be comparing themselves to the outlier, right? So my skiers, they're comparing themselves to like Michaela Schifrin, right? Hockey guys are comparing themselves to Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, or these guys who are just like the best ever in their sport. And then that's a comparison that's really hard to always, make work. What happens then is athletes think that they should be at a certain place at a certain time. And we would all agree, everybody listening to me right now, you would all agree that every athlete is different, right? We have some commonalities, but we have different, ways that we develop. What we would all agree with, though, is this is the formula to be a successful athlete, okay? Here it is. You have to train. You have to recover from training. You have to then compete every once in a while, right? And then you have to recover from your competition. And then you have to repeat that process. So train, recover, compete, recover, repeat, right? I wrote about this in my book, but that's the recipe for every athlete in every sport, okay? Doesn't matter if you are playing underwater hockey, which they do in Canada, which is really, really weird. If you're playing volleyball, if you're an equestrian athlete, if you're a skier, a figure skater, it doesn't matter. Train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. My question to you is, how much or what do you do to maximize that timeline? When your athlete trains, are you doing everything your athletes doing everything they could possibly do to maximize their recovery from training? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question too, by the way. It's either you are or you aren't. I'll get to that in a second. Same thing goes from competition, right? You have a big competition, a little competition. Now you have to recover from that competition. How quickly, how effectively are you doing that? Now, immediately, people start to go like, well, we're only doing this or that or whatever. We're not doing all of it. Like we could eat better. They could get more sleep. I get it, right? Because it all runs down into resources, okay? Time, energy, and money, right? So if you got a lot of time, you can recover, right? If you got a lot of energy, right? And how do you maximize energy? To me, that's the primal triad, which is eat, sleep, move, repeat. Okay, I got a lot of repeats going on here today, so stay with me, folks. All right. But that's it. So, but what happens is when you apply Parkinson's law to this, that for most families, they'll go, oh, well, my son or daughter doesn't need to be that good right now. Or, wow, Michaela Schifrin was amazing at like 16 and my daughter's not like that at all, right? So it's usually a negative comparison, but all you can do in that situation is you have to find a way to do the best you can with the resources you have, right? Now, I've worked with billionaire families with athletes. I've also worked with families who drive city buses, and we all know there's nothing wrong with being a billionaire. I mean, it is what it is, right? So we can't, blame them for that, right? But I've heard the same excuses, whether it's a billionaire family or it's someone driving a city bus. They have the same. They're like, we either have enough of this or we don't have enough of that. We wish we had more of this. We wish we had less of that. It is what it is. But this is where athletes really mess things up, is because they're expecting that they will be good down the road. But in reality, down the road is not what you're waiting for. What you're waiting for is to maximize right now, right? Should you be asleep? Yes or no, right? Should you be hydrating? Do you need more salt or vitamin A, or like, what do you need in your diet to help, manage your soreness, your recovery? Are you maximizing all that stuff? And that's one of the things that I do in the blueprint with my athletes, is help them go through that process. But that's where you just have to look at yourself as a family and go like, are we doing enough? Because really, your athlete could be great now. Now, one of the stories I'll tell you is my own Olympic experience was I got involved in the sport of luge, and 4 years later, we were Olympic caliber in the United States. And we were Olympic caliber, not just the United States, but we were, world class. Like, we were top 6 in the world, which was, that happened really quickly. And so we weren't really affected too much by this idea that, okay, we're competing against guys who've been sliding as long as we were old, right? So, are we supposed to be good in 12 years, 14 years, 16 years? No, we were good in 4 years. And part of the reason we were able to do that was we came at it with a bit of a fresh mindset. I think we were just open and we were willing to learn. And we had got some input from some Italian athletes who helped us kind of with this idea of like, wow, yeah, we don't have to be like the other American teams. We could be faster, better, sooner than they were. And we were just open. Now, one of the things kind of on the flip side of that was going on at the same time in the sport was that the junior cutoff, like from junior to senior, was 18 years old. And so there was this thought that like, if you weren't good by the time you were 18, you should probably stop. And so that can do is that can compress time, like in Parkinson's Law, like, okay, you're trying to be good by 18, but what if you're not there? And so there was a couple of years there where people quit, like talented athletes just quit because they felt like, oh, if I'm not good by now, I should just be done. When the flip side of that is just this understanding of like, I'm just trying to get as good as I can get as quickly as I can get there by maximizing my training, my recovery, my competing, and the feedback I'm getting from all that. And I'm doing everything I can to absorb all those lessons and take what I need and discard the rest. But that is what's going to accelerate your athlete. So as a parent, if you are guilty of just not putting timelines on things, just letting work expand, then your athlete is probably going to have that same experience. And in reality, an athlete can grade themselves on everything that they're doing, right? They can grade themselves on their training and then the recovery. They can keep a journal. They can take notes. They can understand that, wow, how do I feel today? Wow, I'm sore 48 hours after my last event, right? But my team, but then could I improve that? My teammate, they're still sore. And here's what the mistake is, that you can think like, well, just because they're sore, I should be sore too, right? But what if all of a sudden your teammate goes like, I'm not sore. Now all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a second, I must be doing something wrong. That's an attitude you gotta kind of think about all the time, right? It's like, what can I be doing to improve this, right? I really want my athletes to become a student of the game, of their game, not just the game that they're involved in, but their game. Like, how are they doing? What could they do to improve, right? And I want them to avoid what I call athlete incest, is that when you look at other athletes, when you look at other athletes and you start to compare, like, okay, they do this, and so I should do more of that. There's a great business mind by the name of Jay Abraham who wrote a book called Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got. And that there's a he talks about marketing incest, where businesses will of the same category will look at other businesses that are similar and see what they do and do the same thing, but just try to do more of it. Just try to outwork them, and that's unsustainable. The real impact in a business is when they take something from outside of their genre, right, or their category of business, and bring it in. And now they leapfrog. Now they have amazing changes. They have huge like exponential growth, things along those lines, right? And so your athlete needs to avoid kind of athlete incest, right? And looking just sideways, taking side, oh, you're doing this, I should be doing that too. That's a good idea. I should do that. Instead of looking at it consciously and going like, all right, listen, I need to improve my flexibility. Who has really good flexibility? Well, gymnasts have good flexibility, right? I'm going to look at gymnasts in order to see what they do to be flexible and explosive. I'm going to take that into my sport, right? Who has good, I need balance in my sport. Who has really good balance? Surfers have good balance. Who else has good balance? Well, geez, motocross riders have really good balance. Crazy enough, right? What do they do, right? That's when your athlete starts having these leapfrog moments, and they can change. They can really accelerate their improvement in their sport, no matter what that sport is. Okay, so that's really, really important to understand. Then Josh Grogman writes, I'm actually working on this very problem right now, breaking my own habits and helping my athlete in his world. Thanks for making me not feel crazy. Josh, thanks for posting that. Like that's part of this, right? I have athletes. So one of the things to understand is that I do believe that your athlete, your son, your daughter, doesn't have to take your bad habits with you. And there's a concept, a name that I was just doing research on this weekend. Of course, it just fell out of my head. But I'll have to find it later. But transitional character, that's it. Becoming a transitional character. There was a paper that was done in the 60s on this idea that, there are people that come through bad families. Not that any of you are bad families, but just bear with me for a moment. Stories of people coming through families that are abusive, or there's drugs or alcoholism or depression or things like that. And then this new generation decides, I don't have to be like that. I don't have to continue that story. So as parents, and I, like most of you, before my son Quinn was born, man, I was beating myself up, going like, I wish I had, there were certain things now I didn't do drugs, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, do anything like that. But there was just things about me that I wish was better, right? And I hoped my son didn't carry that on. Now, they do look to you for habits and responses and things like that. And God knows, Quinn has some habits that I wish he didn't have, or some tendencies that I wish he didn't have. And that's all me. I could see it every day, and it bugs the what out of me, as I'm sure it does all of you. But it doesn't have to be like that. And it really comes from them, right? So it becomes from their awareness of these traits and these challenges. It comes from their moments of just understanding of like, wow, I don't need to take that with me, right? I can leave that trait. I don't need to take that with me. I had an interesting discussion with my son last week about musicians who had good music and were great musicians, but had done some bad things in their life, right? And it was the conversation of like, well, do you then discard all of the good things that they had done just because of the bad thing that they had done? And my take on that is that you can pick and choose, right? If someone was an incredible talent and you can learn from that talent that you can apply to your own life, take that. Why wouldn't you take that? Now, if they were doing crazy stuff and that those are tendencies you don't want to take, then leave that. It's like a buffet, right? Oh, I like the sushi. I don't want the jelloed eggs or things like that, right? You're going to take what you want, leave the rest, right? So for Josh and for anybody else, like, don't feel so bad. Like, but one of the things that I tell all my parents as well is that your athlete may be trying to be an Olympian. and you may not be an Olympian, right? My parents were both musicians. They both had their masters in music. Now, they weren't athletes, but they did understand performance. So there's some things that you probably do in your life that you can apply, that you can pass on to your kids, but don't feel like you have to be an Olympic athlete. But I will say this, one thing that I see that a lot of athletes miss as I work with them on a weekly basis is they don't always they're seeing the results of what you've done your whole life, right? So if you have a company or if you have a career, they're just seeing you do those things on a daily basis. They haven't seen the work that went into that. And one of the best things that I recommend my families do is to pick up your own habit that they can see you, something new. Maybe it's like you've wanted to play the ukulele or the guitar or the piano. Music is always a good one because it's good for our brains. And so and you can start at any time. And it's something that they can hear. They can hear you struggle, right? But then they can also hear you improve. And so while they're doing their athlete thing and they're going out doing their work, you can go, you know what? I'm going to take 15 minutes today and I'm going to practice the guitar, right? And so you're going to put a timer down and you're going to spend 15 minutes. And you're going to tell them, wow, I'm learning the guitar. It's pretty cool. And every day I just do it 15 minutes. Because we all know that young kids feel like they've got to do a lot of work, right? That's what those are the stories that get trickled down, is that, oh, you've got to run hours or work out hours. And that's not necessarily true. You just have to be really efficient in the work that you do so you can recover and then go back and do it again and then compete and get feedback and do it again. And I'll tell you this, that as a parent, if you can show something like that in your life currently that you're struggling with or sticking to, or they're going to see that and they're going to take that to them, their own field of play, whether they're trying to go to the Olympics or they're, trying to make a national team or they're trying to compete at school or whatever. Doing that, because there's a lot of disconnect between kids and their parents because they don't see the work that you've put in up until this point. All right. So don't beat yourself up, Josh and everybody else. It is what it is. But if you can do something new, that can help. And it doesn't have to be big. Like I said, it can be, it could be like a memory skill. Like check out Jim Quick at QuickBrain, KWIK brain.com. Check out Jim Quick and try some of his his mind stuff, or take up a new a musical instrument or do a Spartan race or whatever, just anything that they can see and you can help relate to them. That's going to be really helpful all the way around. Okay. So in conclusion of today, okay, got a lot of people on today, which is great. I really appreciate all of you guys who've kind of come on, and people come and go. And then I see later people have left comments, and I really want you to understand that understanding Parkinson's Law, okay, and Parkinson's Law, again, just to recap, is that work expands the time that you give it, right? Just like this podcast, for instance, I was like, I'm going to give it 30 minutes, and now here I am. It's 39 minutes, and I'm still going, right? But you're still listening, so that's okay. But work expands the time you give it. Try this. Book a meeting or book something that you got and book an end time on it. Like maybe you're going to call your mom and you haven't talked to her in a while. So you're going to call her at 4:30 and you say, hey, Mom, listen, I got to go at 5, right? Or, 4:35, whatever it is. But put an end to it. Try to work, right? Okay, listen, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to meet at 9:30, but it's got to be, I got to be out of here at 9:45, right? Or whatever it is. Try that in your own life and see how it feels, right? Give yourself 20 minutes to get the groceries done, right? And see what happens. See what happens to your mindset. Like your feet are gonna move a little quicker. You might prepare a list, right? You might go you might strategically map yourself through the grocery store, right? You know where the deli is, and you know where the bread is, and you know which aisle the tuna fish is, and the bag of chips, right? They're halfway down aisle 7. You'll start going oh yeah, this is how we got to do that. Now imagine if you take that mindset, right? You've actually forced yourself into a situation to now think quicker. Now imagine if that carries over to the way your athlete looks at their career, right? Yeah, for my luge guys going to Lausanne in a couple weeks, right? They're going and it's all booked and paid for and it's gonna fun. They get the stuff, right? They're getting their gear. That's the best part, right? It's getting the free stuff, right? But they're going and it's set. Now what's gonna happen is they're gonna go and they're gonna get a response, right? They're gonna get a feedback. They're gonna get a result, right? And now when you come back from that result, they've got to now go like, what is it I'm doing? What did I do well? What was I prepared for? What about my abilities were ready or what wasn't ready? Physically, technically, tactically, what do I need, right? Because if you maximize this, all right, and compress your time, then you're going to come up with better answers. And then you're going to stop looking at each other. They're going to start going like, okay, my buddies are up all night. They went to the club because, right, you're supposed to go to the club after a race, right? Oh, but then they stayed up too late and they drank too much. Now the next day they feel like crap and they're supposed to slide, and that sliding session was just crap. Now that happens all the time in every sport, but does it have to? The answer is no, right? The answer is totally no. But that's going to be up to the individual decisions your athlete makes, the work that they're giving themselves. Do they want to drag this out, right? Or are they going to get really time efficient? Right. And that's one thing I never was taught enough as an athlete, right? It's something now that I see now every single day. And the athletes that I work with who are able to adopt some of that, even to a small degree, right? It's like, okay, okay, I'll go out and have a beer with you guys, but I'm going to leave early. I'm going to catch a cab early back to the hotel, get some sleep. That's just like a small thing that makes a big difference over time. So I want you to consider that. And remember this, every athlete is just doing this. Train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. Get some feedback, repeat, apply, do, right? And do that as efficiently as you can, right? That's what's critical. So have your athlete apply that to themselves, right? And they're going to, not according to their buddy, not according to their sister or their brother, or there's this other guy over there, this other girl over there, or that's the person they saw on Instagram, right? They apply it for themselves. And then Parkinson's Law will compress, and your athlete's going to get more done quicker because we want that feedback sooner rather than later, right? And so I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you take this and apply it. I hope your athlete hears it. I know not all the athletes hear it, the parents do, which is fine. But if this has helped you, do me a favor, email me or leave a comment or email me, coachedwards@athletespecific.com. If I can help your athlete, this is a big year, 2020, a new decade, right? It's a new year to get going. So if I can help you, by all means, you can book a call at athletespecific.com/call. And I'd love to work with your athlete as well. It's funny, as the years have gone on, the coaches of the athletes who I work with write me and go, thank God. Right? You totally kicked our athlete into gear. That was awesome, right? Stuff I've been, and this comes a lot. Coaches go like, the stuff I've been telling my athlete for years has finally sunk in because of you. So thanks for that. So I appreciate that, right? So I hope this lands on good ears and gets applied. I'll be posting this on iTunes as well. If you want to hear it there, and I'll be posting it on YouTube as well. But you can also check it here as part of the group. So if you're watching on my page, please share this with an athlete, a coach, or a parent who needs to hear it. And I'll see you guys next week. Cheers. Bye now. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's Jonathan, and do me a favor, share this with an athlete, a parent, or coach who needs to hear it. And then head on over to athletespecific.com and download any of our freebies. We've got free automatic negative thought download, free webinars, free courses for athletes and parents. And I hope to see you there soon. Cheers.